With that, it's over to you, Sheffield. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ian. My name's Sharron. I'm a recovered alcoholic. It's really good to be here, and it's always a pleasure to be asked to speak somewhere, even though I do get a bit nervous when I speak. I think we all do, but it's worth just calming that self-centered fear, and in order to carry a message, hopefully, to somebody that needs to hear it, wants to hear it, or whatever. So yeah, Young's asked me to share around the second step, but to do that, really, I have to get some context with it, and that really is for me to go back into the first step, because my first step experience was I was around the fellowship for quite a long time before I actually understood what it meant to be totally powerless over alcohol. I was in and out of the rooms of AA, I was in and out of treatment, I was in and out of hospital, I was in and out of various other establishments which I won't go into, and I just could not understand why it was that I could not stop drinking. So the first step, when I finally did find someone who understood the problem as it's outlined in this book, and also the solution, when I finally found a lady who understood that, she helped me see for the first time what it actually meant to be powerless. And once I understood that, from that powerlessness and that place where my ego was completely deflated and I was on the floor, sprung the willingness that I need in the second step. So I wanted just to talk a little bit about that and read some of the book as we go along. So step 2 is in the 4th chapter, We Agnostics. And it's always interesting to me, I love how they write in the book, the authors of the book, because they certainly knew how hard it was to get into my head, this information, because what they tend to do is repeat it over and over again in a different way. And I find that really interesting. So they spend the first 55 pages of the book talking to me about powerlessness, and the first part of the first step, and then right at the beginning of We Agnostics they repeat it all again. They say, in the preceding chapter you have learned something of alcoholism. We hope we have made clear the distinction between the alcoholic and the non-alcoholic. My sponsor did that with me. She went through the different kinds of drinkers that this book talks about, and that we see in the rooms and in treatment and wherever. The moderate drinker has little trouble in giving up liquor entirely. And she asked me, is that you, Sharon? And I was like, no, definitely not. Then there's a certain type of hard drinker who has a really bad habit, and it could impair him mentally or physically. However, if this guy or lady has a sufficiently strong enough reason why they shouldn't drink again, they can make a decision to stop. Or, and this is the interesting part, moderate. Now, I could never ever moderate my drinking. Once I start drinking, I absolutely cannot stop. And this book, in the doctor's opinion, explains that perfectly to me. It talks about the alcoholic having an abnormal reaction to alcohol. He calls it an allergy, and that when the alcoholic drinks, they experience the manifestation of that allergy, which is the phenomenon of craving. And that makes total sense to me. Just as the book says, it explains many things for which I can't otherwise account. It explains to me why it is that every time I drink, I lose control. And that brings me to these questions that it asks at the beginning of We Agnostics. It says, if when you honestly want to, so I wasn't a hard drinker, by the way, I'm the real alcoholic as described on page 21. And I know that because of these 2 questions here, which it asks me again. If when you honestly want to, you find you cannot quit entirely. And that was definitely me. I'd made many resolutions over and over and over again that I was never going to drink again. Every time I said it, I meant it. But the mental obsession and the twisted alcoholic mind took me back to that first drink over and over and over again. It'll be different this time. If I mix it with this, if I mix it with that, they won't find out. You know, of course I'm not going to end up in rehab again. I'm only having one. And, you know, the lies that my mind told me over and over again around this, you know, powerlessness and this first step. So when I honestly wanted to, I absolutely could not quit entirely. I could only get a few weeks at a time. And it says, or if when you're drinking, you have little control over the amount that you take. And that's obviously because of the allergy and because of this phenomenon of craving. You know, it says, if that be the case, you may be suffering from an illness which only a spiritual experience will conquer. And I put a ring around lots of things in this book actually, but I put a ring around only, because by the time I got to the second step with my sponsor and fully understood my first step, I understood that only a spiritual experience could conquer my alcoholism, because in the process of going through the first step, we looked at all my different experiences of the things that I had tried in order to conquer my alcoholism. And I had tried everything, and nothing worked for me. You know, with regards to the craving, I'd tried to control my drinking. I tried to change the drink I was having. I tried to drink only at weekends. The book talks about a lot of these details, and I tried all of those things. You know, and if the physical allergy was my only problem and over drinking was my only problem, then the solution to that is really, really simple, and it is, don't pick up the first drink. But for me, what I learned the hard way was that I had an utter inability to leave that first drink alone. This mental obsession kept driving me back. And we looked at that in the first step. We looked at my alcoholic mind, and my sponsor helped me to see that every single thing I'd tried, everything from, you know, a doctor, a psychologist, a psychiatrist, every kind of therapist you could imagine, CBT therapy, hypnotherapy, every kind of therapy that you could imagine, everything had completely failed me. My alcoholic mind lied to me and took me back to that first drink every single time. You know, so I ended up on the bottom, if you like, of page 25 of the big book, where it says, if you are seriously alcoholic as we were, we believe there is no middle of the road solution. No middle of the road solution. And that was what all my things I'd tried were. They were middle of the road stuff, you know. I was in a position where life was becoming impossible, drunk or sober. It was obvious that my life was impossible when I was drunk, because it was chaos. But even when I was sober, my life was impossible, because I couldn't live a life that didn't take me back to drinking. I couldn't live a life that didn't make me restless, irritable and discontent, so uncomfortable in my own skin that I had no other option other than to drink. You know, life was becoming impossible. It says, if we pass into the region from which there's no return through human aid. And I'd tried all the human beings. My sponsor went through that with me, you know. It says we had two alternatives. One is to go on to the bitter end, blotting out the consciousness of our intolerable situation as best we could. And the other is to accept spiritual help. And I was at the point where I just knew that I had to accept spiritual help. And I came to it quite open-minded, really. You know, I was one of those people who, you know, I was even before that hideous step one experience where I realised I was absolutely doomed, I'd always kind of believed that there was a power greater than me, you know, and I'd always been interested in spirituality. But at the same time, I felt very, very disconnected, because I was very, very sick. Now, this chapter, We Agnostics, I mean, it's an amazing chapter, and that's what it's talking to us about, you know, spiritual matters. But all I need initially, because for me, there's different kinds, if you like, of step two. You know, if I'm the first time in my work, in doing the steps, or if I'm taking someone through the steps for the first time, step two is really, really simple. It's a really simple question that is asked of us, and that we you know, it's a yes or no answer. It's not complicated. But leading up to that, you know, it's given us the summary of alcoholism in the first paragraph there. And then over on page 45, and I love this part of the book where it says lack of power. That was our dilemma. You know, if I'm powerless in the first step, lack of power is my dilemma. Not lack of knowledge in my case, because I had also too much knowledge, if anything. It says we had to find a power by which we could live in a way that's not driving me back to alcohol. And it had to be a power greater than ourselves, obviously, it says. Obviously, you know, because I can't do it. But where and how are we to find this power? Very good question. And then it answers it immediately and says, well, that's exactly what this book is about. Its main objective is to enable you to find a power greater than yourself. And later on in this chapter, it tells us exactly where and how we are going to find this power. And I say there's so much in We Agnostics that you could that you know you could speak about, and obviously I can't do all that in one talk. But if you knew around, you know, step one is a really simple. For me, it was very simple in the beginning. Put it that way, because I saw that I was powerless in the first step. I knew that I needed power, and I was absolutely desperate. So when my sponsor asked me that question, that's on page 47. It was directly connected to alcoholism at that time, because I couldn't get more than 2 weeks of sobriety. And it says here, we needed to ask ourselves but one short question. Do I now believe, or if I don't, am I even willing to believe that there is a power greater than myself? And I put a ring around is, because at this point, it's not asking me to believe in anything. Going through this process for me has brought about that belief. You know, the experiences that I've now had in sobriety, I've got my own evidence now that there's a power greater than me. But back then I didn't have that. So I just have to be willing to believe that there is a power. I've never seen anyone coming into AA, you know, doing step 2 and then waking up the following day like, hallelujah. You know, I believe. It just doesn't seem to happen like that. You know, we alcoholics seem to need evidence, and that's what, you know, I've picked up along the way. But I do believe, and I was willing as well to believe that there is a power. You know, one quick look out of the window at the, you know, at nature or whatever tells me that there is a power greater than myself. But also my step 1 experience told me that there was nothing else anyway. I've tried it all, you know. And I absolutely love this part. It says, as soon as a man can say that he does believe or is willing to believe, we emphatically assure him he is on his way. There's your hope in the second step. I just love that. Because I was so squashed in the first step. My sponsor cornered me in the first step, and I was like a gibbering wreck by the time she'd done with me, looking at all my own experiences of powerlessness. You know, there's no hope in the first step. The book actually tells the person who's working with someone to dwell on the hopelessness of this condition. And that's what my sponsor did. So I was like, you know, so it was a relief to me in the second step when we read this. It says we emphatically assure him he's on his way. It then goes on to say that this has been repeatedly proven among us, that upon this simple cornerstone, a wonderfully effective spiritual structure can be built. And that to me is just amazing. And that's been my experience. And that's what we're going to do. We're building a spiritual structure by which I can live, you know, trying to gain access to and have a conscious relationship with this power greater than myself. And as probably a lot of people in this room know, we can choose what that power is. It doesn't have to be a specific, you know, what your sponsor tells you or what somebody else in AA believes. You know, we can have our own concept of this power, which is amazing. So yeah, for me, you know, when I was first in the work, it really was as simple as that. My sponsor asked me that question and we moved on to the third step, you know, where I made that decision. But just going back, you know, there's many parts in the book where it asks me, and I find step 2 a really interesting step today. In fact, recently I was doing an exercise on step 2 for myself and also with some of the people I was working with. And it was really the God is everything or God is nothing question. That step 2 proposition question. And this is something that I've used many times. This is a way in which I've used the second step as a spiritual tool to see where I am on at any given time. A spiritualometer, if you like, you know, to measure where I am. And it's on page 53, where it says, when we became alcoholics, crushed by a self-imposed crisis, we could not postpone or evade. And this can happen to me drunk or sober. In fact, it happens to me more often when I'm sober. We had to fearlessly face the proposition that God is either everything or else he is nothing. God either is or he isn't. It asks us, what is our choice to be? You know, when I first came along, you know, I had that desperation, that willingness to, you know, be willing to believe. But as my sobriety, and this is my experience for myself and working with others, as we get more time under our belt, you know, and the ego rebuilds a little bit, that willingness to believe in this power to make it everything or nothing, my experience is it sometimes dwindles away. You know, so this is a good way for me to see if I'm still, you know, on beam. And I recently did this, and I did it by looking at page 52. Actually, is a good starting point for that, and asking myself those questions on that page. Am I having problems with personal relations? Am I a prey to misery and depression? Can I control my emotional natures? You know, can I be helpful to others? Am I full of fear? Because I guarantee you, if I am, those are the areas of my life where God isn't, where I'm not choosing God to be everything. I'm experiencing fear because I'm relying on self. The book tells me that, and that's my experience. Whenever I'm experiencing fear, it's because I'm relying on myself and I'm not willing to give this power the chance to guide me. And I stop seeking that power in the second step, years away from a drink, you know, and I end up with my feet firmly planted in page 52, which is self-will run riot. And for me, what usually happens is I get angry, indignant and self-pitying because things don't turn out the way I want them to turn out, and I end up restless, irritable and discontent. And if I haven't got a connection with this power that removes the obsession to drink, I will drink again. There's absolutely no doubt in my mind of that. You know, I don't do these things to keep myself sober. I do these things because I'm sober. There's a difference there. So yeah, interesting exercise for those of us who've been around for a while is to ask, do we still believe in this power greater than ourselves? And can it take me past here? Can it take me past this brick wall with this relationship? Can it take me past, you know, spiritual sickness in these relationships? Can it take me past difficulties in my life here? Now, that question for me is always really crystal clear, because if this power can remove my obsession to drink and return me to sanity, which is exactly what's happened to me, then I believe this power can do anything. Because I absolutely never ever dreamt in a million years that I would be free, not only from alcoholism, but from the bondage of self as well. That I would be free from that. And I know that it's this power that I became willing in the second step to believe in that's done that for me. It has accomplished for me that which I couldn't do for myself. There's no doubt in my mind about that, you know, and that keeps me in the work. It keeps me accountable. It keeps me, you know, in contact with my sponsor. It keeps me in the 10th and 11th step and the 12th step. You know, all of these things here that, you know, powerless in the first step and connecting with the power in the second step, all of that keeps driving me through the work. For me, it's always step one. You know, I'm blessed actually, because I work with a lot of women, and, you know, in doing that, I'm blessed to have had a lot of step one experiences when I'm going through the work with others, where I end up literally sitting on the edge of my chair having my own step one experience, thinking, my God, this is why I do this. This is why I work hard with these spiritual tools on a daily basis, because I'm absolutely crystal clear on my step one. So I'll finish on this because I think it's about time, but just wanted to talk about the how and the where. You know, back when it tells us lack of power is our dilemma, you know, where and how are we to find this power? And it tells me on page 55 where and how I'm going to find this power. It says, actually, we were this is my favourite part in the whole chapter, actually we were fooling ourselves, for deep down in every man, woman and child is the fundamental idea of God. It may be obscured by calamity, by pomp, by worship of other things, including alcohol, but in some form or other it is there. For faith in a power greater than ourselves and miraculous demonstrations of that power in human lives are facts as old as man himself. We finally saw that faith in some kind of God was part of our makeup, just as much as the feeling we have for a friend. Then it tells us how we're going to find it. Sometimes we had to search fearlessly. And of course, that's what I'm doing in the fourth step. I'm searching thoroughly and fearlessly to see what it is in me that's blocking me from this power that is already inside of me. And a great friend of mine describes this paragraph like this, and I love it. He talks about a lamp being on, and this lamp shining on, and some tea cloths going over it with every self-centered, dishonest, you know, my ego, all my defects of character going over and over and over this lamp, and the light going out. But the fact of the matter is that the light is still on. It's blocked by these things that I've created. And that's what I start to see as I move further into the steps. But the light is still on. Excuse me. The power is already there. But we have to search fearlessly for it, it says. And that's what it's going to ask us to do in the fourth step. It says he was as much a fact as we were. Then it tells us where I'm going to find this power. It says, we found the great reality, capital letters, deep down within us. Deep down within me, that power is already there. I've turned away from it. That's my experience. And I can still do that today. I can turn away from it. And then I start feeling pain and I wonder why. And I realise what, you know, the fact of the matter is I'm safe and protected today. You know, in the first step, I saw my absolute insanity around alcoholism. That is, for me, that, you know, the insanity of alcoholism is that stone cold sober, with my best thinking, I will pick that first drink up. That's the insanity of alcoholism. Now, the second step asks me to come to believe in a power that can restore me to sanity. And that's totally been my experience, because if, you know, like, I mean, I got a text from someone today saying they'd been walking down the booze aisle and it never even entered their mind. You know, that is return to sanity. Because that's exactly the kind of blind spot that would get, you know, that blind spot would have got me and did get me over and over and over again. You know, so I know today that I've been returned to sanity around alcoholism, around alcohol and around many other things. But I dip in and out with this insanity with other areas of my life. I still think I can control, and I still think I can do this. And this is where I can use step 2 much later on in my recovery. So yeah, I'll probably share for too long. So I will leave it at that. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you. Thank you so much, Sharon.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sharon.